video, we will be talking about the Basic Condition of Employment Act, BCEA in abbreviation. Now, first thing that we are going to talk about, we are going to talk about the purpose of basic condition. We've got 5 facts. We are going to discuss those. Our first point says it provides a clear terms and conditions of employment for the employers and the employee. Now, it means it gives clarity between these two parties, the employer and the employee, on the terms of working.
Everyone clear about what to do?
Now, our second point, it sets the minimum requirement standards for employment contract. Now, it gives the clarity again between the employer and the employee in terms of the employment contract. The third point, it regulates the variations of basic conditions of employment. Now, the differences that we might encounter in employment contract. Then the fourth point, it regulates the right to fair labor practice as set out in a constitution. We know in our constitution we've got all these laws. So now it regulates, set the clear standards in terms of the fair labor practices that should be set in a working environment. And then our last point, it adheres to the rules and regulations that are set by the International Labour Organization. In other words, it adheres, it goes along with those rules that are laid in labor organization. The second part that we'll be talking about the provisions of Basic Condition of Employment Act.
Provisions for your journey?
Now, the provisions, we've got different provisions. The first provision that we are going to talk about, the hours of work. What is expected from an employee? How must an employee work? The first point that we are going to talk about, the workers may not work more than 45 hours in a week. So now the law says a worker must not work more than 45 hours per week.
Liz, don't overwork them.
A worker may work 9 hours a day if they work 5 days. If that worker works from Monday to Friday, that worker must work 9 hours. But if a worker is working 6 days, then in a day, that worker must work 8 hours. Do you see? And then overtime, a worker must agree. A worker must not be forced to work overtime. And then overtime may not be more than 3 hours. In other words, if that worker is working 9 hours, then they're supposed to increase by 3, not more than that. And then meal breaks and rest period. A worker must have a meal break of 60 minutes after a worker has worked 5 hours.
Well, time for lunch.
Worker must work 5 hours, then you are entitled to 60 minutes or 1 hour for a meal break. This can be reduced to 30 minutes by a written agreement when a worker works less than 6 hours per day. Then we go to public holidays. A worker must be paid any public holiday that worker has worked must be paid.
Then pay me.
Firstly, a worker must agree to work on a public holiday. Then a worker must be paid a double rate of what is earning. If a worker per hour is earning 7 rand, it means on a public day that worker per hour will be earning 14 rand, a double pay. Then let's go to the other provision now, termination of employment. Now, how one is expected to terminate the service. You are no longer interested, you don't want to work there anymore.
I'm gonna resign.
What is it that you must do? A contract of employment may only be terminated following 1 week notice if the worker has been working less than 6 months or 6 months. Therefore, you're allowed to give a notice of 1 week. But if a worker has worked more time, 2 years, 3 years in that particular employment, then a minimum of 4 weeks must be given if the worker has been employed for a longer period. Then let's go to child labor and forced labor. Child labor, the law prohibits, the law does not allow the employers to employ a child less than 15 years of age. It's not allowed by law to employ one who's less than 15 years. It is also illegal to force one to do work, to do certain job. But if you've employed a child who's less than 18, therefore you're supposed to give that employee not a hard job, a moderate job, an easy job, not a difficult job, because it's still recorded as a child. Therefore, now we are going to talk about different types of leaves that we have. Let's start with an annual leave. Now, an annual leave, workers are entitled 21 consecutive days per year. Consecutive, they should be following each other. You cannot take this day and then after a month you want the other leave day. You cannot do that. It's supposed to be consecutive. So a worker is entitled 21 days. And then annual leave must be granted within 6 months after the cycle has ended. Therefore, we've got a sick leave.
I'm sick. I'm sick, alright.
Every employee is entitled to a sick leave as long as that employee will provide a doctor's note, will provide a medical certificate that proves that you were sick. A worker is entitled, it is calculated in a cycle of 3 years. A worker is allowed to be absent in a cycle of 3 years, 30 days. It means per year you can be absent 10 days as long as it is in that cycle of 3 years. Therefore, we go to maternity leave.
Have been away on maternity leave.
Now, maternity leave, every pregnant woman or pregnant employee is entitled 4 consecutive months. The law allows it. And then a pregnant employee may not be allowed to perform difficult duties or the duties that could harm the unborn child. The employer is not allowed to give pregnant person that type of a job. And then we go to family responsibility. Now, family responsibility, a worker is entitled, it is allowed to be absent 3 to 5 days per year to assist or to help any family member of that, or in a case of a death, you'll be given a certain time to go and conduct those
responsibilities.
Point on a family responsibility, an employer may require a reasonable proof. If you were there to bury one, you must come with a proof that state that definitely you were in that funeral.
What funeral?
And then the last leave that we'll be talking about, it is a parental leave.
What is it? What is that?
A parental leave, an employee who is a parent is entitled, who adopted a child, we are entitled 10 consecutive days after the birth of the child to go and what, I don't know, that you will do with that little baby. But the law grants you 10 consecutive days to bond with a child. So the different leaves that we are going to talk about in terms of Basic Condition of Employment Act. Then let's go to the impacts now of BCEA, Basic Condition. Now, the first point, it creates a framework of acceptable employment practices. Example, working hours. People know exactly as an employee how many hours one must work, how many leave one must take. You know, it is clear, it is standard. So it gives a standard so that it eliminates a misunderstanding, eliminates a conflict between the employer and the employee. And then the second point, it outlines the minimum requirements that form the basic of employment contract.
Okay, and the rules are very clear.
Then the third point, work hours are specified so that the employer cannot exploit the employee. The employer cannot come at the last hour and say, yo, we've got a crisis. Now please, even after 9 hours that you've worked, or after 8 hours that you've worked, we've got a crisis, please do what? It's supposed to be a communication whereby you agree to work that overtime.
A pen.
But it prohibits the employer to exploit the employees in a workplace. And then the fourth point, the employees are permitted to consult labor union in a case of misunderstanding or in a case where their rights are being violated. One can go to labor and trade unions.
Expect a call from my union rep.
But it gives a platform where one can voice his concerns. And then the last point, employees may submit complaint to labor inspectors who can assist or address that complaint. If you've got a complaint, you know exactly the platform, which platform you should go. You should go to labor inspectors, and then the labor inspector, they're going to investigate the case and find out and come with a solution to that problem. Those are the impact advantages. Right. Now let's go to the negative impact or the disadvantage of basic condition. Now, what is bad about basic condition is that at times the employers, they feel employment contract, they are time consuming. To sit down and draft it and do what, they feel it is time consuming. That's a disadvantage. Our second point, the business may regard employment contract negative and may not implement it, which result it into non-compliance. At times the employer may feel they disclose too much things to these employees.
Hide it.
So now these employees will be knowledgeable. They will know their rights. So they decide not to give a employment contract so that they'll be protected. Then our third point, no employer may force an employee to work more than 45 hours per week. It is clear, it is stated. If you are expected to work more than 45 hours, therefore you are exploited.
That is low.
And the fourth point, hiring cheap labor, it's no longer possible because everything it is in the open. One knows exactly what is expected from him or from her. And the business who do not comply with this act, they may be charged high penalties that could affect the cash flow of the business negatively. That is the last point in terms of the disadvantage. Therefore, we go to non-compliance with the Basic Condition of Employment Act. When we are not complying with this act, you will be preventing workers having the access of employment contracts. Therefore, you are conducting non-compliance. Then the other point, when you are refusing to accept the medical certificate, one was sick, now one comes with a medical certificate. If you as an employer refuse to take that medical certificate, then you are conducting a non-compliance. The other way of not complying with this act,
Maternity leave.
therefore, that is a non-compliance in terms of this act. The penalties, if you did not comply with the law, therefore definitely there will be consequences. Now, what will be the penalties of not complying with Basic Condition of Employment Act? The first point, the labor inspector may serve a compliance order to this business by writing it to this business that you did not comply. They are going to send that non-compliance as far you did not comply with whatever the regulation. Therefore, you will be given a non-compliance order by a labor inspector. That is our first point. And then our second point, the labor inspector may investigate the case and therefore question the complaints from any employee and collect the evidence of that misconduct.
It's an open investigation.
And then the third point, the business may be taken to labor court for ruling for not complying with the act. And then, for example, if one is pregnant and then you don't want to grant a 4-month leave to that woman, therefore definitely they can take you to a labor court. Therefore the labor court will issue out a ruling. And then the fourth point, the business that are found guilty for not complying, they might be faced with heavy fines. They're going to charge you maybe 200,000 or whatever, but you are going to be faced with heavy penalties or fines for not complying with Basic Condition of Employment Act. They can be ordered to pay compensation for the damages that they've caused. you'll be expected to pay that employee. You refuse for that employee to provide you with a sick leave, sick note. Therefore, you will be expected to pay some fine for that. And then the last point, the Director General may agree or may change or may cancel the compliance order. Then that is a last point in terms of the penalties of non-compliance. Our last point under basic condition, that will be the ways in which you comply with that.
Yeah. Okay, I comply.
It is more or less a sort of a replication of what's supposed to be done when you want to comply with basic condition. Our first point, it says the workers should only work 9 hours per day if they work 5 days, and the workers can work 8 hours per day if that worker is working 6 days per week. Then the other point, overtime should not exceed 10 hours per week. And then workers can take up to 6 weeks paid leave during the cycle of 36 months. And then the other point, the workers must receive a double pay if that worker worked on a public holiday. That worker, it is entitled to receive a double pay. And then the other point, they must have a break. The workers must have a break of 60 minutes after a worker has worked 5 hours. Therefore, one is entitled to have a 60-minute break. And then the last point, the business should not employ the children under the age of 16.
Well, that concludes
with Basic Condition of Employment Act. Therefore, appreciate if you could subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much for being with us.